rambling, incoherent response, were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought?
Normally when I play that clip, I got my guests in the green room and they hear that and they go, what? Or they laugh like there was a rational thought. Trust me, there's lots of rational thoughts coming to your way today. You're going to want to take notes. If you don't, check below. There's always going to be notes there you can download and review it later. But our guest today is a passionate marketer, PR veteran. She's worked with thought leaders, change makers, Fortune 500 companies, tech companies, and startups to help build their brands, get press, and make an impact. She's also a proud organizer of TEDx Boca Raton, but she's most proud of her 2 teenage children. So welcome to the show today, my good friend, Cindy Metzler. Cindy, how are you today?
Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
That's going to be fun. Before we get started, we want to give them a reason to stick around. So what's the big giveaway or takeaway we can think about today?
Well, we are going to talk about 3 tips to get on TV. How about that?
Love it. That's a good one. All right. So stick around. Before we get to that, I first want to find out about this lovely lady here who cannot have two teenage children. Come on, you must have been a child bride or something.
Oh, thank you, Doug. You're so sweet.
How did you get into PR media? What's your background there?
Yeah, so I've been in PR for a long time, and I I did go to school for marketing, public relations, and fashion buying and merchandising in New York. I went to FIT. And so, I did study. I started working in fashion in New York, and then I ended up moving to Florida and stumbled into work for an agency, and I loved it. And then it went from there. That was during the .com boom. And so worked with a lot of tech clients, worked with a lot of .coms. And then, of course, when the bubble burst, then that's when I went off on my own. And just have been working with a lot of clients ever since. Very interesting. Like you said, Fortune 500, some startups, some mom and pops.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we'll get to the ways to get on TV in a moment here. I'm sort of curious about some of the things that people try to do and mess up when getting more media attention. What are some of the biggest fails you've seen?
Well, okay, so this is actually very relevant for TEDx too, with media. When it's your personal story, you think that your personal story, that everyone should be as attached to your personal story as you are. And sometimes the stories are amazing, but that's not what the media is looking for. The media is looking for something that's newsworthy. So lots of times, whether it's, we get pitched a lot for TED Talks, but also media, because I've been in the business for 20 years, we know what the media likes and what they don't like and what they respond to. And sometimes I've even hosted events with Meet the Media where they'll share tips and tricks and do's and don'ts. And I think that is a stumbling block that a lot of people come across, is that they think that their story is, and sometimes the story is amazing.
Right.
Nothing against the story, but it's just how you have to position it.
Yeah. We publish books, of course, and every single person I talk to thinks their book should be a movie, that they've got the greatest story in the world. And I have friends in Hollywood, and like, have you seen Hollywood? It's like, Transformers is what they like to sell. Right. But I do have one coming out about a guy who was over in Afghanistan when it fell recently, and the people falling off the plane and whatnot. He was there at the airport. He escaped the Taliban. That's going to be a really good one. But for the most part, you're right. People need to understand their story needs to be positioned for the audience to get something out of it, right? I mean, when you have a newsworthy story, what's the actual takeaway or benefit to the viewers? What do you do that when it's a corporate client who's invented a widget or something? How do you position it so that it's interesting to the general audience?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think the beauty of PR is that you research and you find out who is writing about things in this genre, in this vertical, in this industry, or who is, covering stories about it. I know whenever I travel and I read things, my mind is going in a million directions with articles, right, that you read on the airplane, or even TV segments that you see how your client or an industry could fit into that. And I'll give you an example. Like, in Florida, well, actually, this is nationwide, that the Biden administration just approved recently a scholarship for students from K through 12, right? So I have a client who just opened a school, and yesterday the governor in Florida signed the bill to make it official so that every parent will get access to this. Now, I don't know all the details of it, but every parent will get access from K through 12 to this scholarship opportunity. And basically, my client is being interviewed actually right now about that, because that was announced yesterday. We reached out to the media last night. This morning, set up interviews, and then now he's being interviewed. So you just, that's one of the tips, actually. We're giving a sneak preview, is following trends. So one of the tips is following what's trending in the media and figuring out how your story can fit into whatever that trend is.
That's great. When I first started doing press releases for my clients, somebody taught me about a thing called newsjacking, which is what you're kind of hinting at here.
Yes.
For people who don't know what that is, I'll tell you a quick story, Cindy. I think you'll appreciate it. We had a client who was doing a female leadership program out in California, and it was the same time that Obama had nominated Penny Pritzker as a Commerce Secretary. And it was kind of newsworthy because first time there was a female as a cabinet position as a Commerce Secretary. So the headline was, what do you want to promote here to my client? Female leadership. Okay. Obama nominates Penny Pritzker, female leadership, to Commerce Secretary. So we got our keyword in there. And I just took the actual news story, the first above the fold, first 2/3, bottom third, it was my client's perspective on it. And my marketing friends called me a genius. My journalist friends called me a whore because we charged.
Right. I love it.
It's both,
a creative thinker. That's the thing. And this is another interesting thing about the media that I don't think everyone understands unless you're living in it. I say that the media has shiny object syndrome because they have to react to what's happening in the news. So we could set something up, for example, and have all the expectations. And I'm sure you've dealt with this with book launches too. All the, illusions. Well, I don't even say illusions. Things are lined up and ready to go. And then something happens, whether it's national news. I actually have an interesting story that I heard that you may have heard too, because it's kind of one of those industry stories. But Dave Ramsey had shared that he was launching his first book years ago. And he was, I think, in the green room of either the Today Show or Good Morning America, but one of the big ones. And just as he was going to go on, what's his name from the Bronco, the white Bronco? I went blank.
Oh yeah, O.J. Simpson.
Yeah. O.J. Simpson sounds like. Yeah. Thank you. My mind.
Breaking news.
Sorry, right. So O.J. Simpson they were all of a sudden, all the media was following O.J. Simpson and his Bronco, and poor Dave Ramsey's book launch went out the window.
See, now you and I would have spun that. Said, no, you got to put Ramsey on it. Dave, make sure you talk about your financial intelligence and putting your assets aside in case you get charged with murder. I would have spun that. I would have helped.
Right. So anyway, that's a huge example that everyone can, but things happen all the time with, like you said, political campaigns. You actually had a great opportunity and you newsjacked. And there was a gentleman who spoke about that, did a presentation. I went to a seminar with Tony Robbins, Business Mastery, 5 or 6 years ago. And he has a book on it too. It was really, really good. But anyway, yes, it's a term that I think that everyone should be familiar with and try to capitalize on when you can, right?
And I think the key lesson there, and please back me up on this because you're more professional at this than I am, but I think you got to latch on to the right trends. Obviously, spinning financial intelligence with a, escaped soon-to-be convict, not convict, whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's a big stretch. You got to make it align. But the challenge that I've seen people have, and myself included, is that sometimes what you want to follow is maybe a micro niche. Like, hey, I don't want to compete with, you cannot compete locally with I do with like national news. You got to keep it targeted to, like, if I'm going to newsjack a business trend, that might only show up on Squawk Box or MSNBC or something. So I might do, hey, there's a new thing with Chat GPT with being used in this one format now. So I could latch on to something local or something more that has legs to it.
Yes.
Something gets a real spike, like, I'm sorry to say, but like a shooting.
Right.
There's usually a spike, and then we tend to forget about it pretty quickly. But sometimes it has like legs that might last for a week or two. Might be easier to latch onto that. Is that right?
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, like you said, unfortunately, there's negative news that definitely dominates the cycle sometimes. And then
Sometimes.
yeah. Right. And but even like, obviously with the Queen of England passing, that was huge news, local,
Right.
national, regional, everywhere. Everyone was speaking about it, and rightfully so. That was very big news. But yeah, there's definitely ways to tie into different things. I know, for example, the America's Got Talent, or those types of shows, whenever there's something national, like I'm on the board with cystic fibrosis, and we have sometimes every year we have a Nashville singer-songwriters event. And if there's something nationally in the news with one of those big shows with singers, we piggyback on that, and we try to comment about it with our singer-songwriters events. So that's how you can sort of capitalize on those things on a local level.
Right.
You're speaking to things that are relevant nationally or even locally. Sometimes somebody local, like where I live is South Florida, and it's, I would say, the golf capital. Tiger Woods lives here, a lot of the high profile golfers. So this is another thing from a golf charity perspective. It's a neat way to get media coverage for charities too. And the media, normally they want to cover things like that. They can't cover all of them, of course, because there's so many, but if you could tie it into something newsworthy, it definitely is interesting to them and to their audience. That's what it's all about. It's about, making it interesting to their audience.
Right. We're going to get to the 3 ways guaranteed in a minute. I have so many questions about this because I'm so fascinated by a couple of issues, and I want to touch on one. I want your feedback on it. It's the whole, slowing down for the crash, the negative news thing, and the limbic brain, how we always are attracted to the negative side. And I believe back in the 80s, somebody tried a good news channel and nobody watched it.
I know. It's like that, what they say, that runaway the train on the tracks. They want to see the car crash or it's we actually had one of our TEDx speakers who was from the media in the past. Like, her history was she was a media personality, and she did a talk about that, and and just how you have to fact check and be careful, and things can go viral even when they're not true, and it's a whole thing, right? So
but I want your perspective on the fact that, if it bleeds, it leads, because we want to watch this stuff. And I don't like watching it. I've actually, not watched a complete news show since 9/11. I feel like I just don't like it. It's just, it makes me
and lately there is so much, there's so much polarization, but the thing is, like, if these things happen, they have to cover it. I actually feel, my heart kind of goes out to a lot of the people in the media, because they're getting calls at 2 a.m. when these like horrible things happen, and they're, young, and they're working 24/7 shifts, and they're the first ones at these, sometimes tragic sites, and
But in your opinion, why do they have to cover a house burning down when some kid just got a scholarship to a college, which is much more impactful and relevant to our society?
I do think it's part of what you said, that it attracts viewers, and I don't know if it's part of that dopamine effect with social media, with kids, and just people wanting to watch things like that. But I'm hoping there is a fair amount of positive news, especially on a local level. I know that I've been working with the media locally for years, and They do try to help and cover, like I said, new schools, new perspectives, charity functions, events, scholarships. But again, when something negative happens, it's like everything else kind of falls off the radar and gets bumped. And obviously political as well. When it's political oriented, that happens too.
Right. So let's get to the juice here, the juicy part of how do I get on TV? You got some tips for us how to get people so they can try to do it themselves, although it might be tough, but give us some ideas on how to do that.
Okay, so we kind of touched on these a little bit, but one thing I wanted to talk about was how you can make your story newsworthy. So think about, as we were talking about tying it into trends, but also think of how you can become an expert source for the media. So if the media is speaking about something that you know about, or that you have a background in, whatever that is, you can position yourself as an expert. Whenever you're running a story on this, please reach out to me about this. And maybe you're an expert in lots of things, but I feel like those are great ways to get in front of people. And, the media also, they get pitched like literally thousands of times a day. So the second thing I would say is to make yourself available and make that a priority. So this is one thing that we deal with our clients sometimes with scheduling. It's like, if we could pitch and then all of a sudden it's like, yes, we're ready to do the story. And then the client might say, oh, I have a workout session and I can't do that. And it's like, so if you want the press, you have to prioritize your schedule and say to yourself, you know what? And I have had clients, not recently, but years ago, I have had clients say to me, if they really want to talk to me, they'll work around my schedule. And so
who's famous here? It's not you, pal. Okay, it's the guy with the camera in front.
Right. So, but the thing is, it's like, yes, they want to talk to you, but there's 1,000 people in line behind you,
and they've got like a 3-minute segment. Come on.
Right. That will make themselves available and drop everything. So that's the thing. And it's funny because, in the world we live in, there's so many, gurus that talk about time management. And I believe in a lot of that, but in the business of public relations, you really can't time block, right? Because if somebody calls, like the example that I used about the school and the announcement that came out, last night, if we kind of were snoozing and didn't jump on that opportunity and the client didn't make themselves available, that opportunity would come and go. So that's number two is, if you really want to get media, you need to make it a priority and to rearrange your schedule and make yourself available. Because the other thing is, like, if you do get an opportunity with the media and then you say no, now, of course, if it's whatever, a wedding or a health issue or something like that, but if you say no, you're probably not going to be called again, right?
No, you don't get a second chance on television. I'm pretty sure of that. How do you contact them? I mean, they're getting thousands of pictures a day. How do you possibly break through that noise?
Well, thankfully for us, we have relationships for a long time. Although I have to say that the media, the way that it works lately, has changed so much. Even in the last 2-3 years since COVID, there were hundreds of people at TV stations and newspapers and magazines, and now everybody is working on a really skeletal crew. So it's a whole different world. So it's a lot harder than it was to get media coverage, I would say, traditionally. So you do have to get creative. And thankfully for us, because we've been doing it for a long time, we have relationships with some of the stations and some of the producers. And so we can hopefully cut through the clutter that, a client might go through if they went direct. However, I do have to say, I always encourage mom and pops, if they cannot afford a PR agency, to do it yourself, because lots of times the media does want to help the local businesses, the local
Right.
mom and pop, the local
Mhm.
pizzeria, if you're doing something great for the community or for
Yeah.
students or for charities, they want to showcase that and they want to lift you up and help you. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
don't be afraid. That's number 3. Don't be afraid to go, to go for it.
Mhm.
It's like you don't have to be a professional, especially in the world that we live in. The
Mhm.
media is morphed, it's changed. We're the
Mhm.
media, right? This, what
Yep.
we're doing right now, is the media. Your phone is the media, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
social media is the media. So I just feel like there's so much. It's harder for traditional, but at the same time, build those relationships and make yourself available, and don't be
Mhm.
afraid, and just continue to pitch. And you know what? Don't be afraid of rejection.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I tell clients. Certainly with TEDx, and TEDx is a volunteer role for me, but
Mhm.
it's funny because I would say on average we get between 150 and 250 applications for each year.
Yeah.
And we have one event, and we have anywhere between 6 to 14 speaking
Yeah.
slots. And so if you're not selected, it does not mean that your
Mhm.
talk was not worthy at all.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, you know, people say, "Oh, I know why I wasn't selected because of this, that reason." And I'm like, no, it really wasn't that. It was good, but
Mhm.
we only have a certain amount of spots. So just continue to submit and maybe tweak it, do a lot of research. I mean, I've been doing TEDx since 2017,
Nice.
and I still watch the tutorials when I'm
Mhm.
helping speakers, because you always learn something new, right?
Mhm.
It sparks an interest and makes you start thinking. I do research on the titles of the talks, and this, Doug, and your team
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
really good at it, as far as captivating audience's
Yeah.
attention. Um,
Yeah.
and the media has such a short attention span, just like the rest of us, by the way, but even
Yeah.
less, because they're so busy and they're spread thin. So I think
Yeah.
it's just to keep that in mind and not take it personally. Don't be
Mhm.
afraid. Don't take it personally. It's not you. Just keep reinventing yourself, reinventing
Mhm.
your pitch, reinventing your story, and keep submitting, whether it's TEDx or a media pitch.
Love it. Love it. I was working with some clients recently, and I said, "You realize that even though most people don't read the newspaper anymore, it's all online, there's still a lot of newspapers in existence, especially the smaller ones. And all they do are take feeds from national news. They have no, so if you walk in there as a local author, celebrity, business owner with a decent pitch, you'll be in the newspaper. And you
Right.
can take that clipping and spiral it up to radio, local TV, and go from there. Just, we call it like a flywheel effect, where you start small and don't feel bad about that. I know you put people on Good Morning America, but not everybody gets on that.
Right.
So there's no
Right.
harm in going local and starting there and then seeing where it goes, right?
Yeah, and there's two cool things I want to mention. One
Right.
is I've read the story about 1-800 Got Junk. They had a tiny little story in a
Yeah.
local newspaper,
There you go.
and think about what they are now. They're a huge
Mhm.
business that's a household name nationwide, and that's how it started, in a small newspaper, and it just went viral. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, and I use this in all of my PR proposals, is that Bill Gates made a quote that said, if he was down to his last dollar, he would spend it on public relations. And I love that, because I think it speaks volumes, and
Mhm.
it's really powerful, because PR is really an unbiased perspective, a third
Mhm.
party endorsement per
Right.
se.
Mhm.
So there is a lot of cachet and value behind it.
Right. Terrific. All right. So we're going to be not be afraid. With other three things, let me just summarize them here for us.
Follow the trends,
Follow trends,
and it's not about your story.
not about your stories, but about your what you can help them with, right? And then don't be
Right.
afraid.
Right. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Right. Exactly. Be an expert in
Yeah.
whatever that
Terrific.
is.
What's your biggest success story? What's the one that people go, wow, that's cool?
Oh my gosh. Wow.
What's
Well,
something? Good Morning America is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, no, that's huge. One of my clients during COVID, right? We got them on Good Morning America. It was an indoor air quality company. Obviously, indoor air quality was huge. They were in business for 20 years, and it was just huge that they were featured. They had installed indoor air quality equipment in a local preschool. So it was really a human interest story, which is something else to keep in mind, tie in that human interest angle. Years ago, I had, this was even before I got married, more than 20 years ago, I had my boyfriend was doing like flipping homes, and it was literally like a news. We got him in the Wall Street Journal. We got him in, This Old House, like all of these different stories, one after the other. So, and that wasn't even, they weren't a client. I was just sort of like, oh, this is a cool story. They were flipping homes. And of course, now we have HGTV and all of these things that are hot. But at that time, it was, definitely newsworthy.
Very cool. Very cool. That's great. Well, folks, man, we could talk for hours about this. I probably want to have you back, Cindy, because we got a lot more things to talk about. Cindy Metzler from Ohm Media, OMMedia.com. Say it together. Right. It's a beautiful brand. I love it.
Thank you.
Cindy, any last parting words for us?
Well, just feel free. If anybody wants any tips or advice, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a pretty big LinkedIn community, and love to, if you have a question about TEDx or anything about press, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to assist.
That's great. Thank you so much. Cindy Metzler with Ohm Media. Appreciate you on the show today. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, Doug.
You bet. That concludes the show for today. You're going to want to take notes. And if you didn't, they're right below. So go ahead and click on those notes, download them, and contact Cindy. There's a lot of people out there talking about PR media nowadays, and she's the real deal. I'm sure you'll have a good time and get some more press for yourself. Thanks so much and have a good one.